Welcome to another episode of the Off Market Operator, you guys. Today we have a little change up in the show. Today is more about operations, systems, global talent, a bunch of other stuff we covered. We kind of covered a wide range of topics. I think you're gonna really enjoy today's guest. He was a former State Department, and he's really has a good understanding of people, systems, process, and tools, and has a fascinating journey. So without further ado, let's get right into the show. People don't fail at real estate because they suck. They fail because there's too many ways to succeed. That's why I suggest you focus on the most important skill in all of real estate, which is finding deals. I'm Ruud-Johnson, and in this podcast, I share the exact steps I've used to source 400 deals by age 24. This will allow you to do three things: control your deal flow, make unlimited income, and build your empire as an off-market operator. We're on the boat again here in San Diego. We got some overcast. The marine layer hasn't burned off yet, but it's a nice morning. I'm here with a good friend, Jon, who I have met past couple 6 months through the Twitter sphere, and we had developed a relationship and gotten coffee a few times, and helped me out a lot of ways with my company. And he is not specifically a real estate guy, but he has his hands in everything and understands processes and people and systems and business better than a lot of people that I've met. And a lot of people that have been on the show. So I'm excited for this show. Welcome, Jon. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Did I miss anything about how we met, our relationship so far, besides that one night?
No, man, I think, yeah, right. Yeah, you swiped right. No, I would say, I think you and I both started in trickier industries that forced us to get good, and then spun out what we were good at into its own business. And I was like, oh yeah, this is like one of the guys who thinks about stuff the way that I do,
Yep.
and kind of off we went.
Yep. So I want to kind of start at the beginning, kind of with your story a little bit. So you have a very unique beginning to your adult life that started in Afghanistan, right? I'm not going to give any context there.
Yeah.
I'm going to let you go into,
Sure.
let you introduce yourself and what you were doing previous to your life in San Diego.
Sure.
But I think it's intriguing because the way you had to learn to, read people in situations, right, and how that makes business
Sure.
easy with the EQ that comes with that. I think that'd be a good place to start.
Yeah, sure.
Take it all the way back to
the very beginning, yeah. So I grew up in the Northeast and was in high school when 9/11 happened, and so had a global view of the world just from high school. And so I was like, I always thought I was going to go into the military. So just because I was kind of affected by it, went to school in the Northeast, but ended up joining the Foreign Service. And those are people who work in embassies around the world and kind of advocate different policies abroad, right? So I served in North Africa, I served in the Middle East. They taught me Arabic, so I did language school and all that fun stuff. And the idea was just to kind of get people who don't normally like you to like you, and be able to kind of advance an agenda. And so a lot of what I've learned from that, both indirectly and directly, has influenced the way that I build companies, buy companies, deal with people, and then transitioned out of that into the private sector. So I did that for, better part of a decade.
So your first company, coming out of that, what was your first parlay into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so the first thing I did was I was living in Dubai at the time, and I started raising foreign direct investment money for US-based companies. And you would actually appreciate this. You'd like this story. So there's all sorts of flight capital in the Middle East, emerging markets, that wants to park in the US, especially real estate.
Wants to buy the PGA.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, those are the big ones. But individuals too, right?
Yeah.
Because they're afraid that their funds are going to get nationalized or their currency is going to weaken. So they want to buy assets and just park their money in dollars. And so being in Dubai, which is kind of the financial hub of Africa, South Asia, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, all the people that I knew from my old job were like, we want to put money in the States. And so I hooked up with a couple really large real estate developers who were looking for like preferred equity or, like $1 million check size.
Yeah.
And that was the first thing I did because it was kind of very similar to my previous career, which was just like talking to rich people, building trust with them, networking, getting them to do kind of like what you want, which used to be like helping us fight the spread of chemical weapons. And now it was like helping Hudson Yards get built by Related in New York City, right? So yeah, that was like my first thing, and it was great. It was like halfway. It was just like a little bit of a warm up.
It's like getting you back to the U.S. a little bit.
Yeah.
And that wasn't a real estate thing. That was, Antonio, can you hand me my glasses real quick behind you too? That wasn't a, hey, I love real estate. That was, hey, I love working with, I love pushing people a certain direction that's probably in their benefit.
Yeah.
And talking to them, and that was the business model.
Yeah, it wasn't real estate.
Were you taking fees on that? Okay.
Yeah. So the big thing that I did there that ended up being really useful to me, which you'll appreciate, which was historically the ways that all these guys, and there's still some who do it, but I think I had an impact on how it was done, which was historically it was all done via finders. And so they would get like a really wealthy accounting firm in Istanbul, Turkey, lawyer in New Delhi, to send them their high net worth clientele. And I was like, all right, like that's one way to do it, but there's issues with that, which is like those guys could always send money to a different project. It's a very difficult way to raise capital. And I'm, speaking to the choir here, right? What are the only two scalable ways to consistently generate pipeline? Paid ads or cold.
Yep.
And so what I did with these guys, I was like, you guys need to be running Facebook funnels. And so
to overseas money.
So I was like, why are you working with finders in Istanbul? Let's run Facebook ads. And so we ran huge Facebook ads. We would qualify them virtually, and then we would have someone fly in from the States and do like 40 meetings in 3 days and raise $20 million. But it was all fed by Facebook, and it was direct. It wasn't via these kind of like shady, like meet me at the Four Seasons. It was just Facebook, online, like setter basically. Right?
You're setting people from
people from Istanbul, or I raised a lot of money out of Pakistan, South Africa, Nigeria, and it's the same principles that in your call center business. But like these guys, it was like revolutionary because now they weren't slaves to these agent networks. Because these agent networks would try to constantly get more money.
You're going direct to money. Right?
You're just going straight. You're going straight to the money.
Yeah.
So it's like, why did you not use finders to source deals? Because it's a pain in the ass. It's unreliable. I'm gonna build my own call center, and so that's what I did with these guys.
And are those relationships hard to build? Like in terms of like, you're having them send over $1 million checks to the U.S. Like how are you one screening them, but how are they screening you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, these are big real estate developers, right? And so for me, I just would lend off their credibility. Meaning I wouldn't say trust John, I would say trust Related, which is a massive company, right?
And was the U.S. company paying you to do this? Or were you going to get the money first and then going to these developers saying, hey, I got $20 million from an overseas capital that want to deploy to these kind of projects, these kind of returns?
Historically, it was a success fee based business model, and I didn't want to do that because I didn't want to take the risks and incur the costs. And so what I said was, pay me half of the success fee, but you incur all the costs. But the difference, the big value proposition to them was they could now directly source capital. They didn't, because there's 1 million people who want to source capital. Only the top 10 could access the classic networks, the big boys. But everybody from 11 to 500 is like, well, I really want to raise foreign direct investment, but I can't do what these guys do. I need an insurgent strategy. Yeah. The big boys can do stuff. The small guys can. So I went to them and I said, I'll build you a direct to money system, a machine with CRM and with things they'd never heard of. They're used to just like giving their business cards and drinking scotch. And I was like, let's build a freaking paid traffic, and it worked.
Yeah. A funnel, let's build a funnel. I have a buddy, Artem, who's big on Twitter, Artem Tepler. He develops in LA and other areas. And, they did the same thing. They went and found a couple like Russian billionaire families who wanted, but they weren't a big guy, right? So they had to go build a relationship.
They got to go direct.
That's fascinating, man. You've always had kind of a global view of business then.
Well, because my first job was I lived abroad.
Yeah. So you didn't have that. I feel like most Americans have that separation in their brain of we're American, everyone else is everyone else. Once you get rid of that, you realize how big the world is. But I have through my call centers. But that's fascinating.
If you've ever tried to negotiate with an Indian dude, you don't ever think that Americans are the best at everything. Yeah, those guys will eat your lunch.
Yeah. Okay, so how did that come to a conclusion, right? Like, why did you say no more of running my Facebook ad funnel, the people and place them into U.S. investments?
Like little business.
What did that turn into next? I mean, obviously now you're kind of back in the game, right? Yep. But like, what did that You know?
Yep. So there's kind of two things that happened at the same time, which was first Trump got elected, which created a really negative perception of the U.S. abroad, even though it ended up being fairly short term.
Oh, so this wasn't even that long ago when you were getting
man,
out.
this was like late teens. Yeah. Trump was in office and was, this was like the travel ban and like all that stuff, right? And so there weren't as many people who were like, yay, America, right? Like, oh, do you do Canada? Or, now it's a lot, that all bounced back and it never really went away. But that was just kind of like one thing that just like wasn't quite as whatever. But the bigger thing was, that I saw the folks operating these companies and I was like, I need to own these companies myself. I need to be the operator because I was having to kind of like, it's anytime you're like a vendor or like an agency, you're like, if this guy really just understood how good I was, eventually you're like, I should just do that. Meaning like you run a call center for some, I don't know, locksmith company and you're crushing it, but this guy's wetting the bed. Eventually you're like, dude, why don't I just buy a locksmith company? And now I can finally spend enough on customer acquisition or like I can redo his whole back end and finally keep up with the demand that my call centers are generating or whatever. And so it was the same I mean, I didn't get into like big, real estate, but I was just like, if these are the best guys in this industry, I need to operate. I need to not be like a vendor.
Operate a business, not be a middle guy. Yeah.
Correct.
Middleman, yeah.
Yeah, so that was like, I was like, all right, I just got to like get in the game however I can.
And what was the however you can?
Well, I could raise. Well, I could.
What was the game you got into?
Yeah, so I could raise money,
Yeah.
right? Which is straightforward. So I raised some money and bought some stuff in some companies, and was like the first companies I bought. Was because I have access to people who trust me and who whatever. And I was like, hey man, I want to buy this thing, and without going into too much detail on that because there's still some stuff going on there, but the what I've said, what I've thought about, that I always told myself, and I don't know if this is right or not, but the first time I used somebody else's money to buy something, I told myself, and I don't know if this is true, but there is no higher game in town. Meaning all that happens is there's more zeros. But the top of the game is buying things with other people's money, and you get upside. So like that's how the Yankees are bought. It's just more zeros. So me getting into the first time somebody bought a company for me, and it wasn't my money. Like now all I'm doing is buying bigger companies. And so it was like, I'm a part of the club now. Oh yeah, we bought a company over there. Yeah, we're thinking about a bigger one. Oh, we're going to do a little debt. We're going to do a little like there's no higher game in town.
That's the game, yeah.
That is the high, maybe like public securities trading or something, but like buying and building stuff with other people's money, that's how the Yankees are bought. That's how the PGA Tour, right?
Bought, yeah.
Like it's the same thing. It's just more zeros.
Yeah.
And so I was like, that's the game I want to be in, is buying, building, improving things with other people's money.
And I know you mentioned you can't go into too much detail about the first couple of companies you bought, but I know a lot of, at least what you talk about, and the core industry people know you for is you were in kind of the home service business, right?
Yeah, that was a company I bought. Well, no, I can go deep into that.
Okay.
Yeah, it was the first couple I don't want to talk about.
So that was a company you bought, not started.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I can tell you all about that. Yeah, for sure. One thing I would say, especially for like your crowd and given what I know about your audience a little bit, one of the things that I figured out was if you're good, and good can be defined as you building your skill sets through courses, and if you're sharp as a person and you come with a deal, there's always money. What's hard is you don't have a deal and you're like, trust me, I'm Cole, I'll find something to buy. And like, it's essentially like raising a fund or whatever you want to call that. Like getting dry powder before you have a target, very difficult. But if you're like, I found this thing, I think it's underpriced, I can buy it, here are the terms, will you give me the money? And you just shop a deal around. That was when I finally started being able to get momentum, rather than being like, give me $1 million and I'll find something in my target range. You're like, nobody trusts it. They're like, what the hell are you gonna buy? Whereas you get a deal under LOI or deal under contract or whatever it is. Now, dude, text me, hit me up on Twitter. You got a deal under LOI that's underpriced. Don't worry about the money.
Yeah, that's essentially all my core business was for the first 5 years in business, where we'd go find a real estate deal.
Yeah.
That was that we get an LOI, essentially an LOI on, right, with the right to assign that PSA, and people line up at the door
all day.
Versus the other way, if I went to these investors before and said, hey, I'm going to go find deals, they'd be like,
go find a deal.
Yeah, let me know when you got one.
Yeah, exactly. That's funny, man.
That's
true.
But it's just like this insight that I had.
Same thing with business, man. I think that's what broke my brain the first time we had talked was you were like, man, this thing you're doing with wholesaling real estate and cold calling and direct to seller, like that's the same thing. That's the biggest game you can play, but with companies. Right, that's all these search funds do, and these big boys do is they do exactly what you're doing, but they go find the company and then they negotiate a deal on the company because the owner of the company is going through a certain situation instead of the owner of a house, right? Yeah. And I mean, of course, if that goes into can you operate a business, but that's the part
we can talk about that
that's
too.
People don't talk about, right? It's you go find the money and you put it with the deal. Can you operate the deal?
And I think. The only time you can get ever past that, and you could probably do this now with your track record, is once you have a track record of doing those, at that point, you can say, hey, we're doing a $25 million fund. Here's what we've done over the last 3 or 4 years. GPLP, whatever, we're going to take 2 and 20 or whatever. But once you have a track record, then you can get the committed capital. But until you have a track record, deal by deal, baby. Just go deal until you have enough deals to have a nice track record.
That's so true, because kind of the natural ascension of people in the industry I started in, which is real estate, multifamily, single family, is you do enough deals where people start noticing you build a brand, but it's deal by deal. All of a sudden you have a brand built, and then you can raise a sign that says, I'm raising a fund and I'm syndicating, I'm going to go buy I'm going to go buy bigger multifamily deals. I never thought about it that way, where like you have to get to that point by doing enough individual deals, or then you get on a podcast, or then you build a brand, and then you become the Ryan Pineda, Cody Sanchez. You have a brand, and you can go, hey, give me 30. Everyone, I'm raising a Grant Cardone. I'm raising $50 million to go buy a Class A multifamily building, and you don't have to. They don't even care what the deal is. They just want to give you money.
And that's where I think also too, if I was like starting or whatever, I think the other way you can do it too is like you can create a track record off nothing. Take a $100 card and flip it for $300. Then use that track record to flip a $600. Then do a Airbnb arbitrage,
course.
like you know what I mean?
Then sell a course on it. Yeah.
but I just mean like the track record doesn't have to even be in the same asset class. You just have to show that you're not a pretender. Like, hey man, I crushed it over in this, I'm moving over to this. Like, if you needed to raise money for your call centers, with your background building what you did with wholesaling, it'd take you one tweet.
I could put out one tweet and I'd have $10 million in my DMs. And
that's what I mean, right? And so it's like, you don't even need to build a track record in the same vertical. You just need to show that you know how to get shit done and return more than you took in.
Yeah, and it's also, not only that, but you also have to have people that publicly support, right? And that have say in a public forum, he's not a grifter, right? Because there's so many, and on Twitter and Instagram, there's so many people that show up and they eventually get executed by the community. Like it doesn't take much, but I think that's a fascinating way to look at it, because it's truly what it is. And I found this to be true, man. Once I had success in real estate, I built a brand in real estate. I didn't realize how easily that was going to translate into just general business, right? They didn't care where my success came from, but if you have success in one vertical, it doesn't really matter what you like. Tomorrow you could come out with, you're known for global talent and kind of home service stuff. You could come out with a whole new thing, and people are going to trust you because they. You
want to hear a great? I'll tell you a great story. A guy I was talking to today, really, and he's been written about. I'm not going to say his name, but like you could probably figure out who this person is. This person was a humanities major in college in like the early 2000s, and he found major fraud in a publicly traded company that nobody else knew about. He went out and got cash advances on his credit cards to take a short position and put a bunch of puts on this company. And then he published his research to his blog, and he made a pile of money, and now he runs a hedge fund because he was just some kid who maxed out because he's like, he built his track record with not a lot of money, but it then let him parlay that step by step. So the point being is like what you did with wholesaling, or like some of the stuff I did, like I didn't need anybody's permission. It's not like I now deem you a candidate. You just start doing it, and all of a sudden like momentum builds, you start having a little track. So I think like a lot of people think that they need like permission, and you're just like, no man, I just started
doing stuff.
I just started calling some dudes, and they gave me an assignable option, and then I called some other dudes, and next thing you know, I'm fucking Cole.
So one thing that you've kind of hit on me since we first met is your intentionality and the way you consciously are unscheduled, right? You live your life. You have the perfect idea of what your rich life is.
Yeah.
And you live it. And you don't. I think out of anyone I've met, because I think entrepreneurs have a natural tendency, and there's kind of two questions in one here. Now, entrepreneurs kind of have a natural tendency to. Nothing's ever enough, right?
Yeah.
No matter how much money they make, they're never going to sit on a boat on a Friday, or they're going to be, it's head to the wall forever. What kind of, I guess, what settled you down into that? Defining what your rich life is, not getting caught up in all the BS, and building what you want to build instead. And I have a follow-up question to this that builds on it. But how did that all come about? Were you a guy running around with your head chopped off for a while, and then you reached a point where like enough is enough? Because I run into so many real estate investors, right, that they're like, I talk about, like, there's a hustler stage, especially on this podcast, an operator stage, and an architect stage.
Nice. I like those terms. Those business too.
When you're in your hustler, you're chasing deals. There's no systems, there's no structure, there's no anything. You have no idea what you want to do a month from now.
Yeah.
When you're an operator, you made your first few hires. You're still very much in the chaos. And then when you're an architect, you have system, processes, procedures, a team.
Yeah.
You have good KPI reporting. You have good directions, and you know where you're headed.
Yeah.
Right. So was there a pain point that brought enough, reflection for you, or what got you to?
I'll tell you the story.
What's my rich life? How do I live that? And
I'll tell you the story.
Everything else.
As a small aside, and one of the ways that I've always done really well is taking concepts from one industry or sector and applying them against something else. Mm-hmm. You need to read. His name's John Cipher, Better CEO on Twitter. He is he's been in the game for like 30 years.
I think you go back and forth with him sometimes, right? Yeah, I think I saw
his stuff where he talks about the maturity of companies lines up, and he has like grids where he's like, how to assess your company's sophistication of, one of the things, I think he talks about this, like the laptop test. How long could you close your laptop and the company would survive? He's like, 1 day, you're a phase 1 company. 1 week, you're a phase 2 company. No, I don't ever have to do anything. The company pays its own bills, fires people, hires people. He's like, that's a phase 3 company. And so in your structure that you just talked about, you'll find a lot of analogies in the way that, because real estate's a business. It's just a type of business. And so you'll really like some of his stuff. You should read like his Substack and stuff. You'll get a ton of ideas of just like those systems and stuff. So Cypher's the man. Really, really good guy. So to the question about like the intentionality, it comes probably for me because I'm not a believer. I'm without faith. I grew up in a Episcopalian Protestant family, and so I've had to kind of find my own meaning. I think my own like existential meaning, and I think for me, I consider my time to be exceptionally precious because I don't believe in anything beyond this, and that's just my own personal belief set, and so that has made me focus really on like, I could get cancer tomorrow. Like, am I really gonna not hang out with my family because, like, we're all one phone call away, right? Mm-hmm. And so, like, am I really, like, to what? Make money I don't need? I don't need, like, and so, like, for me, like, oh, well, I can get a big deal. It's like, what are you gonna do with the money? I couldn't even spend that. I'd have to make up ways to spend that money. Mm-hmm. Like, and so it started with talking to myself and my wife about, like, what makes us happy? Mm-hmm. And we're like, what makes us happy? Not having to run out the door at 7 a.m. I was on the beach this morning with my kid, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's like, that doesn't mean I'm not ambitious. That doesn't mean I'm not aggressive. Yeah. But it also is like, what makes us happy? And then what money do we need to support that happiness? And then for anything beyond that amount of money, which I'm over, I just say no to things that I don't want to do. Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, can you fly over here? We'll pay. Nah, what do I need it for? To have some more dollars in my bank account? It's just, it's not a, like breaking the grip of materialism. Like, yeah, sure, I would love a private jet, but if that means that I don't know my wife and I go through a couple marriages, it's not worth it. Mm-hmm. Like, I'd rather have my wife and, fly business class overnight to Europe. And other than that, I'm fine. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't, that's not the way I choose to play score.
You get there, you're not gonna, I saw Nick Huber put out a tweet about this too. He's like, I want to be a billionaire if I can do it within a 30-hour work week.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
And if I can't get there, like it is what it is.
And it's the same thing for me. It's like, I want to have as much money as possible following these 10 rules. Number 1, I never have to commute. Number 2, business travel is not a core part of what I do. I don't mind doing it, but I just don't want it to be a core part of what I do. Number 3, I never have to fill out TPS reports. Like bullshit, like insert bullshit here. Like, if I can follow all those rules, I want $1 trillion gazillion dollars. I'm just not gonna like say, sorry, honey, I'll see you in 2 months. I gotta go be on site at this business we just bought. I don't want to do that.
Dude, I heard a humbling story last night, actually. I was down at the beach condo with my wife and her parents, and we were headed home, and my wife's like, yeah, my dad's friend, he lives in Arizona, and his neighbor her dad's friend's very well off, and so live in one of the nice communities in Arizona, and he was really nice to his neighbor, and his neighbor was a very wealthy guy, very wealthy, like hundreds of properties, like big time guy, and passed away recently, and they didn't have kids, and so they named him the executor of the estate. He didn't know, they didn't tell him. Right, and when you become the executor of the estate, it's a lot of responsibility, but you get a fee of it, right? Because the bigger the estate, the more money you make. And the story, as I was told, was they were donating. They didn't have kids. They were donating 95% or 100, besides what they paid the executor, pretty much all of it to a university, to a health clinic, whatever. And I was thinking, man, like that guy. So many people play the game and sacrifice everything for so many years. And they die, and it all just goes back in the middle of the table to a university that money is so insignificant to them. It's going to fund 2 months of research.
It's your name on a bench.
And and your name on a bench, and you sacrificed your wives and your kids and baseball games and so much stuff for that extra.
Or doing art. Like I love doing art. I love doing pottery. Yeah. Right. Like I love waking up. I also love being on the heel of a deal, but I'm not a slave. There's this great quote that says like. Most men live lives of slavery. Some are a slave to ambition, some a slave to wealth, some a slave to their little girlfriend on the side. Don't be a slave. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, what are you a slave to? Mm-hmm. Like I ask myself, like, what am I a slave to?
That's a very biblical teaching for someone
with no faith. I think it's a philosopher. But it's just like, don't be a slave. And it's like, including a slave to like, I'm a deal junkie. It's like, well, then you're a slave. I know how to control you.
Yeah,
I'm a slave to
like, money.
Whatever.
Right, like I have some buddies that I grew up with that it's just like every dollar needs to be counted and tracked, and it just creates a life that's so.
It's just not for. Yeah, but the thing for me is, it's a very personal journey. Your life might be, I want to X that's completely different than me, and I'm like, dude, that's cool too, but don't just examine it from that perspective. Like, why are you doing this? Yeah. And you'll find, I think, that your number's a lot lower than you think it is.
Yep.
And that, like, the things that make you happy aren't necessarily the things that, like, society tells you it's supposed to.
If you're being honest with yourself, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they have to go through, unfortunately, like, I have a good buddy who was one of my original partners in my call center that's no longer part of it, but had to go through a brutal divorce, right? Yeah. Just to kind of, I think, hit that and be like, okay, like, what is... what's all this for? I think it's fascinating. I think you really ask, like, when you take away the word millionaire, billionaire, trillionaire, whatever, and you really look at, like, money's made up. Yeah. It's literally paper, and all it is a tool, right?
Yeah.
That's when I really shifted for me of like, and I have big goals and ambitions, right? But at the same thing I've gotten to.
You're not a slave to them.
And even being young, I'm working through it.
Yeah.
I would say I'm a recovering
You're a recovering slave?
I'm recovering.
That's not the right way to say that. Let's edit that out. No, that's okay. You can leave it in. Like, that's not the right way to say that.
I'm a recovering money slave to money. I mean, it's true because I geared. And so now I'm like sitting at my computer, why am I sitting at my computer at 6 p.m. like to make an extra $5,000 this month, make an extra $10,000 a month, like
exactly.
And I play that out a lot.
Like I'm gonna how about this? Like, what about you other than what you do professionally is interesting? If you don't have a good answer to that question, like again, when you're below a certain amount,
because I think for some people like for business is a hobby for me too.
It is for me too.
So it's like if it's 10 p.m. and like I'm talking business with someone over text.
No, that's what I want to do.
Exactly.
Yeah,
but
that's what I want.
I think you're right though. For if you don't want to be doing it, then what else? Because for me, you asked me that question. I'm like,
no.
My wife says I like to travel and eat food.
But I don't want to be a vacation. I don't want to a life of leisure is not for me. Like my wife. My wife says, John, every time you get free time, you just start another business or buy one. It's because it's what I enjoy. It's a puzzle for me. But like
it's the stimulation.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's the challenge. But I also play chess every day.
Yeah.
Like I also just because I like doing that too. And so, I think I don't know what the right answer is. I think that's the right question though.
Yeah.
And it's also different once you're at a certain point.
And I think people also have to answer the question of, do they really want money or do they want to be famous? Because I think that's like what some people want to make money on Twitter and stuff. And I'd ask ask myself that question. I'm like, am I on social media to make money, or am I on social media because I want people to know that I make money?
Yeah.
Am I on social media because it makes me money and grows my companies, or am I on social media because it people just know who I am? And I think that's another question that people have to ask themselves.
Warren Buffett had a great thing. And the other thing that happened for me too is living in the Middle East, I was around a lot of wealth. And I lost my fascination with it too. I saw it up close and I'm like,
hey,
this dude's miserable. He owns the biggest thing I've ever seen. He owns a frond on the palm in Dubai. He owns the whole thing. This dude sucks. Mm-hmm. Like, this guy is worth, he's a royal. I mean, he's a whatever. I mean, and so, Warren Buffett has this great thing, and I don't know what the exact line is, but he says, my day-to-day life is almost identical to yours, other than the way I travel. But I drive a car, I sleep in a bed. You have the same sheets that I do. You go to an office complex.
Same phone that I do.
You have the same iPad I have. Yeah. Everything's other than the way that I travel. And it's like, when you think about it like that, it's like, you're going to live your life as a slave to traveling a little better. Like, okay, just know what you're betting on.
Know your game, yeah.
Know what game you're in, man. So that helps me think about it.
So I guess my follow-up question to that, why I asked the question, is I wanted the audience to be clear on, like, you do live a life in intentionality. You're on the beach this morning.
Yeah.
You don't live
I try to.
Yeah. But with that, you have to have a business that's structured, systemized, and
big time.
And things are in the right place. So if you were coming into my call center, my real estate company, or someone else's business, how do you go about structuring that? Obviously, I know the global talent part, but the rest of it...
That's actually a byproduct. Yeah. So the global talent is a byproduct of having a well-run company.
Yep.
Because the magic of global talent isn't unlocked if you just slam a bunch of cheap people against the side of your company.
And that's what people think it means, is I have no systems, no processes, no training, no onboarding, no management, no KPI structure, nothing, no goals, no communication, no team meetings. And just
Correct. So it's the other way around. So global talent is a byproduct of systems, not the other way around, right? So like the example that I give, the story that I tell, and then I can tell you about how I'd approach your stuff, is like, if Gordon Ramsay, I talk about this, I write about it. If Gordon Ramsay has been making your French fries for 2 years and he makes $1 million a year, right? Are you going to the next day take somebody who makes minimum wage and have them do what Gordon Ramsay does? It's not going to work, right? Because he's worth millions of dollars. He's running this unique process. No, here's what you can do. You can build a system that captures what's in Gordon Ramsay's mind. Okay, how much salt did you pinch there? Okay, what temperature did you move them out of the tray? Mm-hmm. You write all that shit down. Now you say, hey, minimum wage stoner, follow this checklist, and guess what? You just turn the minimum wage stoner into somebody who maybe isn't going to be quite Gordon Ramsay, but is going to be 95% of the way there, and now you can build a business.
And I put this out on Twitter, but someone told me recently, they're like, consistent mediocrity is better than intermittent excellence, in the sense of
great way to say it too.
Of a task getting done, where like it's, if you have someone that does this, like for me, like as I've handed off more and more stuff, if I have someone that is working on our marketing every single day,
correct,
360 days a year, we're going to have better marketing than me if I'm working on it 1 day a week.
Correct.
Even no matter how good I am at it.
Correct.
But I think that's interesting. So your systems first, you'd come into a business, you take whatever is...
I'd understand, what are you guys doing? Yeah. Like, what are we doing here? How do we find customers? How do we sell customers? And how do we fulfill
it's leads conversion operations, right?
Yeah, exactly. Same thing.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sticking around, you guys, for the last hour or so as we filmed another episode here on the boat. Again, it's a little overcast today, but it made for a good little atmosphere. If you want to connect with Jon, you guys, he gives a lot of free game out on there on hiring and systemizing, organizing your small business, which most of you guys, whether you're in real estate or whatever else you do have a small business. For most people that reach out to me and connect with me. So he's a great follow. Matzner Jon on Twitter. That's where he shares a lot of his golden nuggets, and he has a good Substack on there as well that you can follow. Link through his bio. You can hop in that Substack and get all the goodies he gives away. So as always, you guys, please give us a share, follow, like on wherever you're consuming this: YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. And until next time, you're only one deal away.